All right, we're in the second chapter of Shoftim, or Judges. Now the angel of Yehovah came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I brought you up out of Mitzrayim, led you to the land I swore to your fathers, and said, I will never break my covenant with you. You, for your part, are not to make any covenant with the inhabitants of this land, but let's tear down their altars. Now, earlier we were in the study in Genesis, and we were talking about the division of the land. We talked about how people say, well, Israel must not truly be blessed because all the land that was supposed to be given to Abraham and his descendants is not coming to the possession of Israel. It's not part of Eretz Israel. And I was pointing out that Yitzhak and all the sons and grandsons of Keturah all received land grants from among that land, and that we shouldn't be so quick to just assume that all that land should go to the descendants of Yaakov. Yitzhak. But now we're talking about when the angel of Yehovah brought the children out of Mitzrayim through the wilderness and up into the land that was promised. Now, it may not have been the whole land that was promised, but it was a portion and is a portion today of the land that was promised in that study that we did earlier. Elohim says something very important here. He says, through his angel, he says, I will never break my covenant with you. And who does he say that to? He says that to Beit Yisrael and to the strangers who dwell among us. He doesn't say it to the so-called New Covenant Church. He doesn't say it to the foreign nations. He says it to us as a people, Israel. And that's important to remember because that word never, it's just like all means all, and that's all means. Never means never, and that's all never means. Everybody get that? Doesn't say never until Mashiach comes. Doesn't say never until the end of this age. It doesn't say never until the end of the millennial kingdom. It doesn't say never except anything that I've ever heard preached in the mainline church. It says never. I will never break my covenant with you. Okay? So the people who say they read the book of Hebrews, and they say, oh, well, see, the first covenant failed, and there's a new covenant. No, go back and read it in the context of Scripture. The covenant didn't fail. Someone partaking of the covenant failed. Now, he who is perfect and cannot lie said, I will never break my covenant with you. Then he said, you, for your part, are not to make any covenant with the inhabitants of this land, but must tear down their altars. Okay? That's a two-part responsibility there for the children. Okay? Elohim says, I'll never break the covenant, but you have to never enter a covenant with these people and tear down their altars. In other words, you have to never go into any kind of worship with them. You have to never go into any kind of treaty with them. You have to never go into any kind of subjugation under them. He says, you don't do any of those things. Oh, and tear down their altars. And this covenant will be kept. However, you have paid no attention to what I said. What is this you have done? This is why I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they will be on your flanks, and their Elohim will become a snare for you. In other words, he said, this is a test. If you will not have a covenant with them, if you will be faithful to me, if you will not enter into any agreement with them contrary to your agreement with me, and you will tear down their altars, I will bless you. He says, what's this thing you've done? He said, I put a test here. I tested you by putting this thing on the side of you. That you could either choose to honor your covenant with me, or you could choose to go into covenant with them. When the angel of Yehovah spoke these words to all the people of Yisrael, they began crying and wailing at the top of their voices. Okay? So they called the name of that place Bokim, or crying, and sacrificed there to Yehovah. A few things in that line that really jump out at me here. Okay? Number one, what separates the Jewish faith from every other religion in the world? It's the people as a united body hearing the voice of Elohim, or in this case, hearing the voice of the angel speaking for Elohim. Okay? You go to Islam, Muhammad met an angel. If you go to Mormonism, okay, Joseph Smith met an angel. If you down through history, there's been all these other religions that have always said, oh, so-and-so had a divine revelation. Really? Anybody witness it? Well, no, he came down off the mountain, or he stood up from under the tree, or he did whatever he did, and he gave us this new religion, and it works for us. And I'm like, you know what? That's interesting. Because there's only one religion in the world that keeps its own commandment that says by 2 or 3 witnesses all things may be established. There's only one religious belief in the world that does that, and that is the Jewish faith. This is the second time in Scripture that the entire people of Israel, the entire people have heard the voice of the living Elohim. And in this case, they wept. The first time they were fearful. The second time they wept. The first time was at Mount Sinai. When Yehoshua had sent the people away, the people of Israel had gone each one to his assigned property in order to take possession of the land. The people served Yehovah throughout Yehoshua's life and throughout the lives of the older men who outlived Yehoshua and who had seen all the great work of Yehovah which he had done for Yisrael. Okay, so they had seen it with their own eyes. But when they died, the next generation did not know him. I want you to think about hard about this. Some people say, well, it wasn't the fault of the younger people. They hadn't seen it. Mashiach says, blessed are you who have seen and believed, but more blessed are those who have not seen and believed. So they could have been more blessed than the generation before them had they not seen and believed. But here's something else. It doesn't say that they doubted him, right? They just didn't know him. And when I read that last night, it struck me. This is not a case of the elders have passed on, and so now they question, do we believe the things that we were told? As I read it, they didn't believe because they weren't told. When Yehoshua, the son of Nun, the servant of Yehovah, died, he was 110 years old, and they buried him near the boundary of his property in Timnath Peres, in the hills of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. When the entire generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation arose that knew neither Yehovah nor the work he had done for Israel. In 2 generations. You see that? We had the generation of the elders who had seen. We saw a generation of the elders who didn't know Elohim because they didn't know what he had done, but they had seen how Yehovah had blessed them. And then we have a generation that doesn't know him at all. 2 generations. Same thing happened in my family. You had a man who was persecuted for his faith. You had his children whom he told will be Jewish at home and something else out in the community. And you had the next generation who basically didn't know that they were Jewish. Then the people of Israel did what was evil in Elohim's or in Yehovah's perspective and served the Baalim. It's interesting. They didn't do what was evil in their own perspective. They didn't do what was evil in the perspective of the surrounding nations. They did what was evil in the perspective of Yehovah. And really, that's where we start to get off base, usually. As we start to justify our own actions, our own behaviors, our own thought processes, we start to look and say, but I think this and I feel that, and that's great. I know what you think, you know what you feel. But you better go back and check that. We all better go back and check that, the things that we think and the things that we feel, and compare them to what his word says. Because when we don't, that's when we fall into trap. They abandoned Yehovah, the Elohim of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim, and followed other Elohim, selected from the Elohim of the people around them, and worshipped them. This made Yehovah angry. You think about that. It doesn't say that there was one false god that they fell into worshiping. It doesn't say that they got together with the Moabites and said, "Oh, well, their Baal is blessing them, so we're going to worship their Baal." No, they went and consciously selected Baalim from the surrounding countries, from the surrounding nations. They went to each one and picked and chose what they were going to believe in. They did this knowingly. They abandoned Yehovah and served Baal and the Ashtaroth. Most of you know, I'm sure, that Ashtaroth changed her name to Ashtoreth, Eostra, to Easter, and her high day is still celebrated every spring in pretty much every mainline church out there. What they were doing then, professing believers are doing today. And then they want to know, why aren't we blessed? The anger of Yehovah blazed against Israel. That's why we're not blessed as a people, as a country. That's why the mainline churches may be full of people giving their money, but they don't see the miracles and they wonder why. And he handed them over to pillagers who plundered them and to their enemies around them, so that they could no longer resist their enemies. You know what he was saying to them? Basically, he's saying, you want to worship their Elohim? Fine, you go be a part of them. And when you don't like being a part of them because you don't like what they're doing to you, guess what? Too bad. Too bad. Whenever they launched an attack, the power of Yehovah was against them. Notice it doesn't just say the power of Yehovah wasn't with them. It says the power of Yehovah was against them. And that's what we do when we knowingly rebel against him. so that things turned out badly, just as Yehovah had said would happen and had sworn to them. They were in dire distress. Earlier we were talking about the misconception that most mainliners have and most preachers bring out about Ishmael. Or not Ishmael, Esau. And the sale of his birthright. And they say, well, he was just listening to his stomach and he didn't care about the inheritance. But if you read the Hebrew, it literally says that he was on the verge of death for lack of eating. I'd say he was in dire distress. And where he was in that moment when he'd been out in the field for so long and without eating, without killing anything that he could cook, he's about to die. I'd say that's where the people as a whole were. I would say that's where the professing body of believers today, for the most part, is. Still chasing their Baal and their Ashtaroth. But then Yehovah raised up judges who rescued them from the power of those who had plundered them, who were plundering them. Okay? Notice he raised up judges. A lot of people misunderstand this. If they haven't read the book of Judges, they believe that these were men sitting in courtrooms. Not what they were. They were war leaders. But before they could take the nation to war, they had to call the nation back to righteousness. And if the nation would turn back to righteousness, if the people would put aside their Baals and their Ashtaroth, if they would put away the sin and turn to righteousness, if they would obey the covenant and cling to it, then and only then could these judges stand up and be the great generals, the great war leaders that Elohim had made them to be. But first they had to remind the people of the perfection of Torah and basically give them an option. You can honor the Torah or you cannot honor the Torah. If you honor the Torah, we will be victorious. If you choose not to honor the Torah, we will fail. It says, yet they did not pay attention to their judges, but made whores of themselves to other gods, other Elohim, and worshipped them. They quickly turned away from the path on which their ancestors had walked, the way of obeying Yehovah's mitzvot. They failed to do this. When Yehovah raised up judges for them, Yehovah was with the judge and delivered them from the hands of their enemies throughout the lifetime of the judge. Okay? So if the judge was called up, called the people to righteousness, the people turned to righteousness, the judge would lead them in battle, they would overthrow their enemies, and the people would be blessed throughout the lifetime of that judge. It says, for Yehovah was moved to pity by their groaning under those oppressing and crushing them. But after the judge died, they would relapse into worse behavior than that of their ancestors, following other Elohim to serve and worship them. They abandoned none of their practices or stubborn ways. Okay? So, judge would call them to righteousness, judge would take them to battle, they would win, and throughout the lifetime of that judge, they would cling to the covenant, and as soon as the judge died, they would be off looking for other Elohim. The anger of Yehovah blazed against Israel. He said, because this nation violates my covenant, which I ordered their fathers to obey, and they don't pay attention to what I say, in the future I will not expel ahead of them any of the nations that Yehoshua left when he died. You know, Israel is back in the land again. We have been since 1948. We fought a battle, we fought a war basically to take possession of some little piece of the land that was promised to our ancestors. And we've been fighting a war all of these years to keep what we gained in that first war. That's really what it's been. It's been called a conflict, but it's been a war nonstop since 1948. You know, if our ancestors had been faithful and not turned away every time a judge brought them to liberation, when a judge died, they would turn away. If they had not done that, if they had clung to the covenant, if they had been faithful to Elohim in that way, not only would we not have had to fight this battle for all these years, this war to take back our land, we never would have lost it to begin with. We're still fighting one of the nations of the land. Actually, really all of them. Because to be a Palestinian, technically, it just means that you or your ancestors were kicked out of some legitimate Arab country and didn't have a place to go, and so you settled in what they called Palestine, which is actually Eretz Yisrael. This is how I will test Yisrael. Catch that? What is going on right now in Eretz Yisrael is a test for us as a people, to see whether or not they will keep the way of Yehovah, living according to it as their ancestors did. You want to know what will bring about complete sovereignty of Yisraelim in Eretz Yisrael? I'll tell you what would bring it about. If Yisraelim, the world over, especially those in Eretz Yisrael today, would turn to the covenant and not look back. You know, there are prophecies all through Scripture that allude to the notion that when all of Beit Yisrael keeps just the Shabbat, Mashiach's coming back. Now, some people like to read it and say, well, when Mashiach comes back, all of Beit Yisrael will keep the Shabbat. I believe that's true. But I believe it's because one of the things that's going to happen before he comes back is that Eretz Yisrael is going to experience a complete Shabbat. Shabbat of years. I believe that's why the prophecies seem to indicate that he will come back during the Jubilee. People say, oh, we're not just saying the day and the hour. No, I'm saying the year. I believe that it will be during the Jubilee year that he returns. Because I believe it will be a fulfillment of that Jubilee year. But in order for that to happen, you know what happens right before the Jubilee year? The Sabbath of years. When the land is supposed to be allowed to rest and all the people stop from their labors and they give extra time to worship because they have the time because they're not out tilling the land and cultivating the fields. When all of Beit Yisrael does that, especially Beit Yisrael dwelling in Eretz Yisrael, I believe we'll know that the time is coming, that he's knocking at the door. So Yehovah allowed those nations to remain where they were without quickly driving them out. He did not hand them over to Yehoshua. And we know that we eventually got a large piece of the land, which we eventually lost, which we eventually got back, which we eventually lost, some of which we eventually got back. The cycle of apostasy has to end, or we're just going to keep losing the land. Do we have a midrash? Which feast would you come back on? I lean toward it would probably be Yom Teruah, because Yom Teruah announces the coming of the kingdom. If not, then Yom Kippur. Because those really, if you think about it, those are the two high feasts that we don't have a fulfillment for yet. Okay, everything else you get something with either in his first incarnation or immediately after when Ruach HaKodesh was poured out on Shabbat. And the two that we never see a fulfillment for are Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur. So my guess, and this is just my guess, I can't point to scripture and say this is absolutely how it's going to be, but my guess is that he will probably appear on Yom Teruah and lead a procession of worship up to the temple, cleanse the temple. There would be enough time to cleanse the temple, and then he could make appropriate sacrifice on Yom Kippur, cleansing the people.
What if the spirit of Elijah?
Oh, it could be. Yeah, I've read scholars who think that someone in the spirit of Elijah will come. We know that. Well, I should say we know. All the signs seem to point to that it will be Elijah, who is one of the two witnesses for 3.5 years prior to everything else happening. So, yeah, I mean, it could be that the two witnesses appear on Yom Teruah, and that down the road, when the time is right, that he appears just to make the sacrifice on Yom Kippur. But we'll know when it happens. Anybody else?